Welcome to Boring History for Relaxing channel. Tonight we step into a Viking longhouse while winter presses its cold face against the walls, and the night outside seems to stretch on forever. You stand in the glow of a low fire, smelling smoke, wool, damp earth, old timber, and something that might be stew, or might be yesterday's stew politely continuing its career. Snow lies heavy beyond the doorway, and the wind feels very confident about its chances. You probably won't survive this if you wander outside in linen shoes and a heroic attitude, but indoors, among embers and murmuring voices, survival becomes possible. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lower your shoulders as the door closes behind you and the longhouse gathers you in. It is not cosy in the modern sense. There is no thermostat, no double glazing, no polite little lamp glowing beside a soft mattress. There is a fire, a roof, thick walls, and a group of people who understand that winter is not a mood but a serious logistical problem. The longhouse is built to answer that problem with every plank, post, strip of turf, and smoky breath beneath the rafters. You stand near the central hearth, where flames lick at split wood and peat, turning orange, red, and blue in the dimness. Smoke climbs upward, but not neatly. It rolls, spreads, hesitates, and drifts along the roof beams like it is looking for someone to annoy. Most Viking Age longhouses did not have chimneys in the modern sense. Smoke escaped through openings in the roof or gable, when the air and weather felt cooperative. This means warmth comes with a sting in the eyes and a flavour in the throat. Comfort, here, is not the absence of discomfort. Comfort is simply being warmer than the snow. The hall itself is long and narrow, often shaped around sturdy internal posts that hold the roof above you like ribs holding up a great sleeping animal. In parts of Scandinavia and the North Atlantic, archaeologists have found longhouses built from timber, turf, stone, or mixtures of whatever the local landscape grudgingly provides. In Iceland and Greenland, where good timber can be scarce, turf becomes a blessing. Thick blocks of earth, grass, and roots are stacked into walls that hold heat surprisingly well. It is not glamorous, unless your idea of glamour is being alive in February, which, frankly, is a very reasonable standard. You move carefully, because the floor is packed earth and may be uneven beneath your feet. In some houses, stone slabs or wooden boards make certain areas firmer, but much of the space is practical rather than pretty. Benches or platforms line the walls. Chests, tools, baskets, sleeping skins, and bundles of cloth occupy corners and edges. Every object has its place because clutter is not merely annoying. It can be the difference between finding a dry mitten and stepping into a bucket in the dark, which is a deeply historic way to ruin your evening. The longhouse survives winter partly by gathering life into one enclosed space. Heat from the hearth spreads slowly. Bodies add warmth. Cooking adds steam. Wool dries reluctantly nearby. A dog may curl where it should not, wearing the smug expression of an animal that has mastered indoor living without ever paying rent. In some farmsteads, animals shelter at one end of the building or in attached byres, their body heat helping the wider household economy of warmth. This arrangement is practical, fragrant, and not recommended for anyone with romantic ideas about Viking cleanliness. Still, the air is not dead or sealed. It breathes through gaps, smoke holes, doorways, and thatch. Too much draft steals heat. Too little ventilation makes smoke oppressive, so the household lives in a constant negotiation with the building itself. A door opens only when necessary, A roof vent may be adjusted. The fire is fed steadily, not extravagantly, because fuel is work. Every stick burned has been cut, carried, stored, and protected from damp. A lazy fire in winter is not just lazy, it is rude. You notice how darkness changes everything. The long winter night is not a simple inconvenience. In northern places, daylight can shrink to a pale, brief visitor. The sun rises late, crosses low, and leaves before anyone feels properly ready. Inside, the longhouse becomes a world of controlled light. Flames reveal faces, then hide them again. Sparks lift into shadow. Iron tools gleam. Smoke stains the beams above until they darken like old bread crust. The outside world becomes sound more than sight. Wind worrying at the roof, snow shifting near the doorway. Perhaps the distant call of an animal that absolutely has no interest in respecting bedtime. A mainstream fact steadies the scene beneath your feet. Viking Age people, roughly from the late 8th to the 11th centuries, lived not only as raiders or seafarers, but as farmers, traders, craft workers, and household managers. Winter survival depended on ordinary labour more than dramatic adventure. The famous ship matters, yes, but so does the storage pit, the weaving weight, the cattle stall, and the person who remembers where the dried fish is kept. History is often less sword-waving and more someone saying, "Please do not waste the good butter." Then comes the quirky detail, quiet but memorable. In some excavated longhouses, deposits of soot built up so heavily over time that roof timbers and interior surfaces became deeply blackened. That soot was unpleasant, but it could also help preserve wood by discouraging some insects and fungi. So, in a very smoky and accidental way, the house may be defending itself while slowly seasoning everyone inside like suspicious ham. Historians still argue whether the longhouse should be understood mainly as a practical farm building, a stage for status and power, or a sacred social space where family memory, law, ritual, and rank all gathered under one roof. As you stand inside, listening to the fire mutter, it feels like all of these at once. A house is never only walls. It is warmth, authority, habit, fear, gossip, sleep, smoke, and the small daily miracle of people not giving up. You edge closer to the hearth, because the cold still reaches for your ankles. Someone shifts on a bench. Someone else scrapes a wooden bowl. A child leans against a folded cloak, blinking slowly. The fire does not roar. It works. It keeps doing the modest, essential thing that everyone depends on. Above you, the rafters vanish into smoke and shadow. Around you, the longhouse holds its breath against the winter night, and you begin to understand that survival here is not one grand act of courage. It is 1,000 small arrangements, repeated patiently until morning decides to return. The fire sits in the middle of the hall like a small stubborn sun, and you gradually realize that everyone in the household moves according to its moods. It is not just warmth, it is the clock, the kitchen, the gathering place, the lantern, the warning sign, and the slightly smoky boss of everyone's evening. When it burns low, voices soften and shoulders tense. When it catches bright again, the walls seem to widen, and the dark corners step politely back. In a winter longhouse, the hearth does not simply decorate the room, it governs it. You crouch near the edge of the firelight, careful not to place your shoes too close to a stray ember, because nothing says historical authenticity like setting your own footwear on fire. The hearth is usually a shallow, prepared place on the packed floor, sometimes edged with stones, sometimes layered with clay, ash, and compacted earth. It must hold heat safely without letting sparks wander into bedding, stored hay, or the kind of dry wooden clutter that turns a calm evening into a very memorable disaster. The people around you understand this without needing a safety poster. They have smoke in their hair and caution in their bones. Fuel matters, wood is precious, and in many Norse settlements it must be gathered, chopped, carried, dried, stacked, and guarded against damp. In regions where trees are scarce, people burn peat, driftwood, brush, dung, or whatever will smoulder long enough to cook supper and push back the cold. This is one of those historical facts that sounds simple until you imagine doing it in sleet. The Vikings are famous for crossing seas, but there is a quieter bravery in dragging fuel home while your fingers go numb and the wind behaves like it has a personal complaint. The flames warm unevenly. Your face glows while your back chills. Your knees toast while your shoulders remain undecided. Heat rises, of course, filling the upper part of the room first, which is wonderful if you happen to be a roof beam. For ordinary humans, warmth comes from staying near the hearth, wearing layers, sharing space, and arranging daily life around the zone where fingers can still function. People do not waste movement. They lean in to stir a pot, pass a bowl, mend a strap, then settle back into the breathing circle of light. A pot hangs above the flames, suspended from a chain or iron hook, and it gives off a steady smell of broth, smoke, fat, and hope. Cooking in winter is slow, patient work. A stew can stretch small portions of meat, fish, grain, peas, herbs, and preserved greens into something warm enough to feel generous. Hot stones may heat liquid. Flatbreads can bake near embers. Fish may be warmed, softened, or smoked further, because apparently food in winter enjoys having a complicated life story. The hearth turns storage into supper, and supper into survival. The fire also shapes time. Without modern clocks, people read the day through light, chores, hunger, animal needs, and the changing life of embers. A household knows when to add fuel, when to bank the fire, when to let a cooking pot simmer, and when to rake coals for heat through the deepest part of the night. Banking a fire means covering embers with ash so they remain alive, quiet and red beneath the surface. In the morning, with luck and skill, someone stirs them awake rather than starting completely from nothing. A sleeping ember is a treasure. Treat it badly, and breakfast becomes an argument with cold sticks. Light from the hearth is precious, but it is not bright by modern standards. Shadows lie thick along the walls. Faces appear in bronze flashes. Hands become more visible than whole bodies, especially hands working thread, bone, wood, leather, and iron. Small lamps may help, burning animal fat or oil with a wick. But these too require resources. Every flame is a decision. Every decision has a cost. You begin to understand why the household gathers near one shared blaze instead of scattering into private corners like people with central heating and unreasonable expectations. Smoke is the unavoidable companion. It curls into your eyes, settles in cloth, and leaves a taste behind your teeth. People living with open hearths become used to conditions that would send a modern visitor searching for a customer service desk. Archaeologists studying human remains from some pre-modern smoky homes have found signs that indoor smoke could affect health, especially lungs and eyes. Yet the same smoke helps dry fish, harden meats, repel insects, and preserve parts of the building. This is the longhouse bargain again. The thing that harms you a little may also help you survive a lot. A mainstream historical fact sits inside the glow. Across Viking Age Scandinavia, the hearth was central to domestic life, and the longhouse was commonly organised around shared indoor work, food preparation, and sleeping areas. The fire's position made it a practical heart, not a symbolic one only. It fed people, warmed them, lit their tasks, and drew them into a social circle. In a world where winter darkness can swallow half the day, that circle matters as much as the food in the pot. A quirky tidbit flickers in the ash. Some Norse households seem to have treated hearth spaces with more than ordinary practicality. Archaeologists have sometimes found unusual deposits near hearths or thresholds, such as small objects, animal bones, or deliberately placed items that may have carried protective meaning. Not every strange find is a ritual, of course. Sometimes a bone near a fire is just evidence of dinner and poor housekeeping. Still, the boundary between useful, meaningful, and mildly mysterious can be wonderfully smoky. Historians still argue whether the hearth in Viking Age homes should be read mainly as domestic technology, or as a deeper symbol of household continuity, ancestry, and belonging. The debate lingers because fire is hard to separate from feeling. You can measure ash layers, study post holes, and compare house plans, but you cannot fully weigh the comfort of a warm bowl passed to tired hands while snow thickens outside. As the night deepens, the household becomes quieter. Someone feeds the fire with practiced restraint. Sparks lift and vanish. The pot murmurs. A sleeping dog twitches, perhaps dreaming of heroic crumbs. You hold your palms toward the heat and feel how fragile the arrangement is. Too much fuel wasted, and later nights grow colder. Too little heat, and damp creeps into blankets, bones, and tempers. The fire must be watched, coaxed, respected, and sometimes scolded. Like a tiny orange livestock animal with dangerous hobbies, the hearth never truly sleeps because winter does not either. Even when people close their eyes, the embers remain under ash, breathing slowly in the dark. Their faint red glow is a promise that morning can begin without panic. Around them, the longhouse settles into its smoky rhythm, warm at the centre, cold at the edges, alive with the soft work of endurance. The walls rise around you with the quiet determination of something that has no intention of letting winter win easily. They are not delicate walls. They do not care about elegance in the way a palace wall might. They care about stopping wind, holding warmth, standing through storms, and giving the household enough shelter to make the next morning possible. You place a hand near the side of the longhouse and feel the cold pressing from beyond it, patient and heavy, as if the weather has all night and a suspicious amount of free time. In many Viking Age farmsteads, the wall is not a single simple thing. It is a layered answer to local materials, where forests are generous. Timber frames and plank walls can form the body of the house, where timber is scarce, especially in places such as Iceland, the Faroe Islands, or Greenland. Builders rely more on turf, stone, and driftwood. Turf walls are thick, earthy, and surprisingly effective. Blocks of grass, root, and soil are cut from the ground and stacked like damp green bricks, creating a mass that traps warmth and blocks wind. It is not the sort of thing a modern real estate listing would call bright and airy, but it does know how to keep you from freezing. You run your fingers along a timber post, rough beneath the skin, and imagine the labour behind it. Trees must be selected, felled, shaped, hauled, fitted, and raised. In Scandinavia, oak, pine, birch, and other woods may be used depending on region and availability. A longhouse frame often depends on rows of sturdy internal posts, set into the ground or supported in ways that hold the roof load. Those posts define the inner space like a forest turned into architecture. The building is not merely sitting on the land, it is wrestled out of it, one beam and clod at a time. The roof slopes above you, heavy with thatch, turf, wooden shingles, or other material suited to the place. A turf roof can be wonderfully insulating, though it also asks the structure to bear great weight. Snow adds even more. The builders must understand balance without modern engineering software, which is probably for the best, because nothing ruins a calm winter evening like a medieval spreadsheet. They read timber by grain, slope by eye, weather by experience, and failure by memory. If a roof sags, leaks, or collapses, the lesson becomes extremely memorable. Wattle and daub may appear in some buildings as well. Flexible branches are woven between supports, then covered with clay, mud, straw, dung, or lime mixtures, depending on local practice. The result creates a wall surface that blocks drafts and can be repaired with materials close at hand. It is humble technology, but humble does not mean foolish. A well-daubed wall can make the difference between a room that breathes gently and a room where the wind strolls in like an unwanted uncle. The door is another battlefront. It must allow people, animals, goods, wood, and winter chores to pass in and out, but every opening is an invitation to cold, so thresholds are managed carefully, doors are kept low or narrow when possible, and people move through them quickly. A leather-hanging wooden door or inner partition can reduce drafts. You duck as you enter because architecture has decided your pride is less important than heat retention. This is not rudeness. This is insulation with opinions. Around the base of the walls, gaps are stuffed, patched, and watched. Moss, straw, turf, clay, wool scraps, or other material may help seal weak places. Snow itself can become part of the insulation once banked against the outside. Though relying on snow to keep warm feels like trusting a wolf to guard your sausages, still, cold regions teach practical compromises. A drift piled against a wall may cut wind. A sheltered doorway may reduce heat loss. A building survives not by being perfect, but by being constantly maintained. A mainstream historical fact rests in these walls. Viking Age longhouses varied widely by region and wealth, but many were large, elongated buildings used for domestic life, storage, craft activity, and sometimes animal shelter. Archaeological remains, such as post holes, wall lines, hearth traces, and floor layers, show how carefully these spaces were planned. Some longhouses reached impressive lengths, especially on prosperous farms or elite sites, while smaller farms may do with more modest halls. Size mattered, but so did repair. A grand house that leaks badly is just a prestigious puddle. You notice the smell of the walls, earth, old grass, timber smoke, damp fibre, perhaps a faint mineral chill from stone. These smells are part of winter life. A turf wall can hold moisture, and moisture is always trying to join the household. People manage damp by ventilation, fire, raised storage, careful placement of bedding, and endless attention. A blanket too close to the wall may grow clammy. Grain stored badly can spoil. Tools can rust. The enemy is not only cold, it is wet cold, the kind that creeps into everything and then acts innocent. A quirky tidbit hides in the building's very skin. In Iceland, some turf houses were so well blended into the landscape that from a distance they could seem almost like low green hills with smoke rising from them. Later turf building traditions continued for centuries, long after the Viking Age. The idea of living partly inside the earth sounds strange until the wind begins clawing at the roof, and then it suddenly feels less primitive and more like excellent customer service from the ground. Historians still argue whether regional longhouse designs were shaped more by environment, social tradition, available labour, or displays of power. The practical answer is probably a mixture, because humans rarely build for only one reason. A thick wall keeps out wind, but it also says something about the farm's resources. A long hall shelters a household, but it can also impress visitors. Even a doorway can express status, because apparently people have always found ways to make entrances socially complicated. You step along the wall and notice repairs, a patch of newer daub, a replaced plank, a place where turf has been cut and restacked. Winter does not begin when snow falls. It begins months earlier. when the household checks what must be fixed before the cold arrives. Roofs are mended, walls are sealed, drainage is cleared, firewood is stored, a lazy summer repair becomes a winter curse, and the house remembers every shortcut. Outside, the wind moves along the building and fails to enter fully. It finds cracks, whistles through small weaknesses, tests the edges, and moves on. Inside, the longhouse stands with its posts planted, its walls packed, its roof burdened but holding. You feel the quiet genius of it, not flashy, not delicate, not comfortable by modern standards, but deeply purposeful. The house is not trying to defeat winter forever. It is only trying to make winter pass around the people inside, one long night at a time. A soft shifting sound comes from the darker end of the longhouse, followed by a warm breath, a hoof scraping the floor, and the unmistakable perfume of livestock living very near people who've decided that privacy is less important than not freezing. You turn your head and let your eyes adjust. Shapes become animals. A cow blinks from a stall. A sheep nudges another sheep with the exhausted patience of someone sharing a commute. A goat watches everything with the expression of a creature already planning 3 crimes and a snack. Sharing shelter with animals is not a charming decorative choice. It is survival logic. In many Norse farmsteads, especially in colder regions, livestock may be housed close to the living area or within the same long building, often separated by partitions on stalls or a lower section of floor. The household depends on these animals for milk, wool, meat, hides, traction, manure, and status. Losing them in winter can mean hunger, poverty, or ruin. So the animals come inside, or nearly inside, and everyone learns to accept a level of smell that modern scented candles cannot emotionally handle. You step carefully, because the floor near the animal area is different. It may be muddier, more trampled, packed with straw, rushes, dung, and old bedding that must be refreshed when possible. People manage this space constantly, though not with modern neatness. Muck is not merely waste. Manure becomes fertilizer for fields, and in some places dried dung can serve as fuel when wood is scarce. Nothing is simple refuse when winter squeezes a farm. Even the least glamorous pile in the room has a future career. History, once again, refuses to be tidy. The warmth from animals is real. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and horses all give off body heat, and in a bitter season that heat can matter. A cow is basically a large, breathing radiator with opinions. The arrangement also makes feeding and checking animals easier during storms. Instead of trudging through deep snow at midnight to see whether a valuable cow is ill, someone can hear it shifting nearby. This is practical, though not exactly peaceful. If you have ever tried sleeping near a restless animal, you know that silence is not one of its gifts. A mainstream historical fact settles into the scene. Viking Age society in Scandinavia and Norse settlements was overwhelmingly rural, with farm households forming the basic unit of economy and daily life. Livestock were central to wealth and survival. Cattle could signal prosperity, sheep provided wool for clothing and sailcloth, goats were hardy milk producers, and horses carried both practical and symbolic value. The famous warrior world rests on a quieter foundation of hay cutting, milking, mucking, lambing, calving, and worrying about fodder. Very heroic, very damp. Winter animal care begins long before the first deep cold. Hay must be cut, dried, gathered, and stored. Leaves and branches may be collected as fodder. Grain, if available, must be rationed. In a bad season, the household measures feed with serious attention. Too much given early, and the animals may starve later. Too little, and they weaken before spring. You watch a woman carry a bundle of hay and shake it loose into a stall. The animals push forward, snuffling and chewing, and the sound is oddly calming, like slow rain made of teeth. The smell is less calming. Warm hide, old straw, dung, sour milk, smoke, sweat, damp wool, and human bodies mingle under the roof. Your nose tries to negotiate, then surrenders. Yet people living here do not experience smell as you do. They read it. A sour change in a stall might signal illness. The sharp scent of smoke tells whether the fire draws badly. Damp hay smells dangerous because it can spoil. Milk smells different when fresh, soured, or turning into something that may still be edible if everyone agrees to be optimistic. Animals also shape the social rhythm of the night. A cow lowing can wake someone. A lamb needing warmth may be brought closer to people. A sick animal might be rubbed, watched, or wrapped. Children learn chores early, not as a quaint educational activity, but because small hands are useful and everyone must contribute. A sleepy child carrying a little fodder may feel very important until a goat steals the bundle and dignity leaves the room. Goats have been humbling humanity for centuries. You notice how the building separates and connects. Partitions, posts, and floor levels create zones. The human area may hold benches, storage, cooking space, and sleeping places. The animal end may be lower, both to contain mess and because warmth rises toward the people. Drainage matters, bedding matters. A badly managed byre can spread damp and sickness. A well-managed one helps preserve the living herd until grass returns. Every board and barrier is part of a winter equation, and the answer must be life. A quirky tidbit pads quietly behind the practical facts. In Norse belief and storytelling, animals are never just background. Horses can carry deep symbolic meaning. Ravens follow gods and battlefields. Goats pull the thunder god Thor's chariot, and cattle appear in mythic images of beginnings and abundance. So while your everyday goat may mostly care about chewing something forbidden, it also belongs to a culture where animals stand close to the sacred, the useful, and the ridiculous all at once. This is quite a range for a creature licking a post. Historians still argue whether bringing animals so close to people was primarily a response to harsh climate, a reflection of farm layout traditions, or a sign of household wealth that needed guarding under one roof. The answer shifts by region. A wealthy farm with many buildings may separate functions more clearly. A smaller or more exposed farm may gather everything tightly together. In the North Atlantic, where wind and scarcity sharpen every decision, closeness becomes common sense. In milder places, the arrangement may be more flexible. You stand near a stall and watch breath cloud faintly in the dim air. The animal does not know it is part of an archaeological debate. It chews, it shifts its weight, it warms the space by existing. Around it, people depend on the winter herd as a living store of value. Milk can become skyr, cheese, butter, or sour dairy that lasts longer than fresh milk. Wool becomes thread, cloth, blankets, and sails. Hides become shoes, straps, bags, and coverings. Horn and bone become tools and handles. Nothing about the animal is abstract. It is food, clothing, transport, labour, wealth, and warmth. Standing there with hay on its nose, night settles thicker, and the longhouse breathes in layers. People murmur near the fire, animals rustle in their stalls. Somewhere a sheep sighs with theatrical sadness, as if winter has personally disappointed it. You feel the strange intimacy of it all. The household survives not by keeping nature outside completely, but by bringing selected parts of it within reach, feeding them, enduring them, and depending on them. The arrangement is crowded, smelly, and sensible. In the dark, with snow beyond the walls, the warm bulk of animals nearby begins to feel less like inconvenience and more like another kind of hearth. You turn from the animal warmth toward the stored heart of the household, where summer and autumn have been folded, dried, salted, soured, smoked, buried, hung, packed, and persuaded to wait. Winter food does not arrive in cheerful weekly deliveries. It sits in chests, barrels, rafters, pits, shelves, sacks, and shadowed corners, guarded by habit and worry. Every bite has a history. Every bowl remembers a warmer month. You look at the supplies and understand that a Viking winter is not survived in winter alone. It is survived by everything people did before the cold took charge. Dried fish hangs near the smoky upper air, stiff and pale, like something that lost an argument with a plank. Stockfish, especially cod and related fish dried in cold air, becomes one of the great food resources of the North. In places such as Norway and the North Atlantic, fish can be split, cleaned, and dried until it keeps for months. It may look unpromising to modern eyes, but it is protein that does not spoil quickly, travels well, and can be softened in water, cooked in broth, or chewed with the determination of someone who has no better options and excellent jaw muscles. A mainstream historical fact rests in the smell of salt and smoke. Viking Age households relied heavily on preserved foods through winter, including dried fish, smoked meat, salted meat where salt was available, grain products, dairy, peas, beans, and stored roots or greens when conditions allowed. Fresh food was seasonal. Preservation was not a hobby. It was the quiet technology that stood between the household and hunger. Long before refrigerators, survival meant making decay slow down and behave itself. You notice sacks of grain, precious and vulnerable. Barley is especially important in many Norse regions, hardy enough for northern climates and useful for bread, porridge, ale, and gruel. Oats and rye may appear depending on place and period, while wheat is less common in harsher northern settings and often more associated with wealth or trade. Grain must be kept dry, away from rodents, insects, damp, and careless feet. A ruined sack of barley is not just a mess. It is fewer meals, weaker ale, thinner porridge, and a household suddenly staring harder at the fish. Porridge is one of winter's great equalizers. It is not glamorous, but it is warm, filling, and forgiving. Barley meal or cracked grain can simmer slowly with water, whey, milk, or broth. Add fat if there is fat. Add dried herbs if there are herbs. Add bits of meat if fortune has not gone off to sulk. You lift a wooden spoon and imagine the texture, thick and plain, steaming in the bowl. It is food that asks little of the teeth and much of the imagination. Modern breakfast cereal wishes it had this level of commitment. Dairy sits in another part of the winter system. Fresh milk is brief, but milk can be changed. Butter stores energy in golden form. Cheese lasts longer than milk. Sour milk, curds, whey, and thick cultured products help stretch the value of cows, goats, and sheep. In Iceland, skyr becomes an important cultured dairy food. Dense, tangy, and useful. Whey can preserve meat or be drunk, though it may not win any awards from people expecting a vanilla milkshake. It is practical, sour, and historically smug. Meat is valuable, and not every animal is kept alive through winter. Before the deepest cold, households may slaughter animals they cannot afford to feed until spring. This autumn slaughter fills stores with meat that must be smoked, dried, salted, fermented, or cooked and eaten during feasting periods. The decision is not casual. A sheep killed now gives food and saves fodder, but it also means fewer animals later. Winter planning is full of such arithmetic, and nobody gets to solve it with a comforting app. The smoke above the hearth is useful here too. Strips of meat or fish can hang where warmth and smoke help preserve them. Smoke does not make food immortal, but it discourages some spoilage and insects while adding flavour. Whether that flavour is delightful or simply unavoidable depends on your standards and how hungry you are. After enough cold nights, smoky dried meat begins to seem less like a survival ration and more like a thoughtful gift from your past self. Your past self, unfortunately, did not include dipping sauce. You find dried peas or beans humble and powerful. Legumes provide protein and can be stored if kept dry. They go into stews, porridges, and thick soups, filling the belly when meat is scarce. Cabbage, onions, leeks, angelica, herbs, berries, and gathered plants may contribute flavour or nutrients depending on region. Some foods are dried, some are stored in pits or cool places, some are pickled or soured. A winter meal may be plain, but it is rarely without effort. Every mouthful has been negotiated with weather, land, animals, labour, and luck. A quirky tidbit waits among the barrels. Fermentation, which can sound suspicious to modern ears, was a friend to many pre-modern households. Fish, dairy, and vegetables can change through controlled souring into foods that last longer. Some later Nordic traditions include strong fermented fish products that announce themselves with unforgettable confidence. While not every Viking Age table smelled like a dare, the broader northern habit of preserving through drying, salting, smoking, and souring belongs to a world where flavour and survival often share a very small bench. Historians still argue whether everyday Viking Age diets were more varied and nourishing than once imagined, or whether evidence from elite sites and exceptional burials has made ordinary meals seem richer than they usually were. Bones, seeds, pollen, isotopes, cooking pots, and latrine deposits all offer clues, which is a scholarly way of saying that historians sometimes learn dinner from ancient trash. The answer likely shifts by wealth, region, season, and luck. A prosperous farm near good fishing grounds eats differently from a struggling inland household after a poor harvest. You watch a woman check a storage chest, lifting cloth, feeling the dryness of grain, counting quietly. Her movements are calm, but not careless. Food stores are moral objects as much as practical ones. Waste is shameful. Greed is dangerous. Hospitality matters, yet generosity must be measured against February. A guest may be offered food, because reputation lives in such gestures, but the household still knows exactly how much remains. The bowl passed across the fire carries kindness and calculation together. Children learn the taste of rationing without anyone naming it grandly. A smaller piece of dried meat, more porridge, a little butter saved for someone ill, broth stretched with grain, fish soaked, pounded, simmered, and shared. Elders remember worse winters and better ones, which is helpful until they begin comparing everything to a legendary year when everyone was apparently tougher and the fish practically dried itself. Every household contains at least one expert in how easy young people have it. The night deepens, and the stored food seems almost alive in the dimness. Barrels hold sourness, sacks hold grain. Hanging fish hold the memory of cold shores and knife work. Dairy holds pasture light transformed into fat and tang. Meat holds the hard choices of autumn. You breathe in smoke, salt, earth, and old wood, and feel how the longhouse is not only shelter from winter, it is a container for other seasons. Summer sleeps here in dried fish. Autumn waits in grain. Past labour becomes present warmth. The household eats time itself, slowly, spoon by spoon, until the dark months loosen their grip, The smell of cooking thickens as the night settles into its slowest hours, and you drift toward the place where warmth becomes edible. The kitchen is not a separate bright room with tidy shelves and cheerful tiles. It is a working zone around the hearth, where smoke, steam, iron, wood, clay, bone, and tired hands all cooperate with varying degrees of grace. A pot hangs over the fire. A smaller vessel sits near the embers. Someone turns a piece of flatbread on a heated stone, and someone else watches the broth with the solemn focus of a person who knows that burnt supper is not a personality trait. You kneel close enough to feel heat on your face. The pot does not boil wildly. Fuel is too precious for dramatic bubbling unless something urgent demands it. Instead, food simmers, softening what is tough, drawing flavour from bones, grains, roots, herbs, and whatever scraps can be spared. Slow cooking suits winter. It takes hard-dried things and makes them chewable. It turns small ingredients into a shared meal. It warms the air, moistens dry throats, and gives everyone something to smell besides damp wool and the ambitious confidence of livestock. A wooden ladle dips into the pot, and steam curls upward. Broth might begin with bones cracked for marrow, fish trimmings, bits of smoked meat, or the remains of an earlier meal. Barley can thicken it. Peas or beans can make it more filling. Onions, leeks, cabbage, or herbs may lend flavour when available. You taste it in imagination first. Salty, smoky, faintly sour, rich if the household is lucky, thinner if winter has already begun counting the spoons. It is not restaurant food. It is survival wearing a warm hat. A mainstream historical fact sits quietly in this scene. Archaeological evidence from Viking Age sites shows a range of cooking equipment, including iron cauldrons, soapstone vessels, ceramic pots in some regions, wooden bowls, knives, spits, and roasting gear. Wealth, region, and trade shaped what a household owned. An iron cauldron was valuable, durable, and deeply useful. Soapstone, especially in areas where it was available or traded, could be carved into cooking vessels that held heat well. The kitchen tells you not only what people ate, but what resources they could reach. I'll wait nearby, or at least something ale-like enough to lift spirits without asking too many modern questions. Brewing is part of household production in many Norse communities. Barley can become malt can become ale, and ale can become a safer, warming, socially useful drink. Though water was certainly consumed too, ale varies in strength, quality, and purpose. Some is everyday drink, some belongs to feasts and ritual, some probably tastes like a dare from a damp barrel. Still, in winter, a cup passed hand to hand can soften the room. You notice how warm drinks matter. Broth, ale, heated milk, sour whey, or herbal infusions can give comfort when cold creeps inward. A hot bowl is not only nourishment, it is a small private weather system held between the hands. People cup vessels close, breathing steam. Lips touch wood or horn. The throat warms before the belly does. A child receives a milder portion. An elder gets something easier to swallow. Someone complains that the broth is thin, and someone else replies with a look that suggests complaints are best seasoned with silence. Bread is more complicated than a neat loaf. In many Norse households, grain is ground by hand on a quern, which is a tiring task that turns stored kernels into meal or flour. Flatbreads, oat cakes, barley cakes, and griddle breads can be cooked near the hearth. Leavened bread exists, but everyday bread in colder rural settings may be dense and practical. You watch hands pat dough into a rough disc. It lands on a hot surface and begins to firm. The smell is wonderful because humans are simple creatures, and warm bread can make even a smoky room feel briefly civilized. Grinding grain is not romantic. It is repetitive, physical, and essential. The quernstone turns and turns, whispering grit and meal. If the grind is imperfect, tiny stone particles can end up in the flour, wearing teeth over years. That is a historic detail nobody puts on a postcard. The Vikings may have crossed seas, but many also ate bread with mineral crunch. Modern people complain when toast is too dark. The past gently invites everyone to calm down. A quirky tidbit steams beside the ale. Drinking horns are famous in popular images of Vikings, and they did exist. But they are not the only drinking vessels. Cups of wood, pottery, metal, and glass also appear depending on wealth and setting. The horn looks impressive, but it has one practical issue. You cannot easily set it down unless it has a stand or fitting. So if you are drinking from one, congratulations. You're now emotionally committed to finishing or finding help. Very festive. Slightly inconvenient. Deeply on brand. The kitchen zone is also a place of careful cleanliness by historical standards. Not spotless. Certainly not sparkling, but governed by routines. Bowls are scraped. Pots are rinsed or scoured with sand, ash, or fibres. Knives are wiped and kept sharp. Milk vessels need attention, because dairy can turn from useful sourness to dangerous spoilage if neglected. Woodenware absorbs smells and flavours, which means tonight's broth may carry a ghost of yesterday's fish. This is not fusion cuisine. This is porous technology. Historians still argue whether winter cooking in Viking Age households was usually monotonous and plain, or whether preserved herbs, dairy, fermentation, trade goods, and local resourcefulness made meals more varied than older stereotypes suggest. The evidence comes in fragments, charred grains, animal bones, residues in pots, plant remains, and traces of imported goods at wealthier sites. You can reconstruct ingredients, but not every flavour. You can identify barley, but not whether the cook was proud, bored, rushed, or secretly furious that someone used the good ladle to stir tar. The social side of cooking is just as important as the food itself. People gather near the work because warmth and news collect there. A bowl is passed. A cup follows. Someone tells a small story about a neighbour's cow, a broken sled, or a cousin who tried to look impressive and slipped in front of exactly the wrong audience. Laughter rises softly, not loud enough to waste energy, just enough to loosen the chest. Winter cannot be joked away, but it can be made to share the room with humour, which must annoy it terribly. You accept a wooden bowl. The stew is thick enough to cling to the spoon, smoky enough to remind you where you are, and warm enough to make your fingers grateful. The taste is simple, but not empty. Grain, salt, fat, smoke, sourness, and long simmering gather into something steady. The fire snaps, the pot swings gently on its hook. Shadows rock along the walls. In this working warmth, the night becomes less hostile. Not easy, not charming in the polished way stories sometimes pretend, but bearable. The kitchen is a rhythm of stirring, sipping, scraping, sharing, and saving. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is separate from labour. A cup of ale carries the field, the malt, the barrel, and the hand that pours it. A bowl of broth carries bones, fuel, patience, and memory. You hold the heat close and understand that winter survival often arrives not as a feast, but as steam rising from a wooden bowl while the darkness waits outside, politely uninvited. You draw your cloak closer and begin to appreciate clothing not as fashion, but as portable architecture. The longhouse may hold back the worst of the weather, the hearth may warm the centre, and bodies may gather heat together, but the cold still finds wrists, ankles, necks, and every tiny gap where a draught can slide in like a smug little ghost. Your clothing is the wool you carry on your skin. It must bend, breathe, shed damp, hold warmth, and survive smoke, mud, chores, sleep, and the occasional aggressive goat with no respect for textiles. Wool is the great winter ally. Sheep provide fleece, and fleece becomes thread, cloth, blankets, socks, mittens, hoods, and cloaks. Wool has a useful gift. It can stay warm even when damp, which matters in a world where rain, snow, sweat, and condensation seem personally invested in ruining your day. It can be thick, felted, woven, patched, layered, and reused until it has more biographies than some kings. A wool cloak wrapped around your shoulders is not just a garment. It is a small weather treaty. You feel the roughness of it first. Viking Age wool is not necessarily soft in the way modern shoppers expect when they see the word cozy printed on a tag. Some cloth can be fine and carefully woven, especially for wealthier people. But much everyday wool is practical, scratchy, sturdy, and honest about its priorities. If it keeps you alive, it feels it has done enough. Your skin may disagree, but your skin is not in charge. Winter is in charge, and winter has very low sympathy for complaints about texture. A linen undergarment helps. Flax can be grown, processed, spun, and woven into linen, which is cooler and smoother than wool. Linen shirts or shifts sit closer to the body, absorbing sweat and protecting skin from scratchier outer layers. In richer households, linen may be finer and more plentiful. In poorer ones, cloth is precious, patched and worn, till it has nearly become an argument. You tug at the cuff of a linen sleeve and notice how much work lives in a simple piece of fabric. Flax must be harvested, retted, dried, broken, scutched, heckled, spun, woven, cut, and sewn. That's a lot of verbs for one shirt. A mainstream historical fact folds neatly into the layers. Viking Age clothing varied by region, status, gender, and occupation. But typical garments included woolen tunics, dresses, trousers, cloaks, hoods, caps, belts, and leather shoes. Archaeological finds from places such as Birka, Hedeby, York, and Greenland reveal woven wool, linen fragments, tablet-woven bands, brooches, pins, and shoe remains. Clothing was not one uniform costume. It was a living system of warmth, identity, craft, trade, and rank. You fasten a cloak with a pin or brooch near the shoulder, and the placement matters. A heavy cloak leaves the working arm freer if pinned to one side. It can wrap around the body while walking, double as bedding, shield the face from wind, or become an emergency curtain when privacy is otherwise having a very difficult century. The cloak is blanket, coat, status marker, and portable dignity. Drop it in slush, and dignity becomes cold laundry. Colour enters the dim room more subtly than modern imagination sometimes suggests. Not everyone wears plain brown. Natural dyes can produce yellows, reds, blues, greens, and muted shades from plants, lichens, bark, roots, and imported materials. Wealthier people may display brighter colours, finer weaves, silk trims, or decorative bands. Tablet weaving creates strong, patterned borders used on cuffs, hems, belts, and straps. Even in winter darkness, clothing can speak. It says who has skill, who has wealth, who belongs to which household, and really should have mended that tear 3 weeks ago. Your feet demand attention. Shoes are often made from leather, sometimes simple turn shoes formed inside out and then turned right side out after stitching. They're flexible but not magically waterproof. Stuff in shoes with wool, hay, moss, or extra wrappings can help against cold. Socks or foot wraps matter deeply. Cold feet turn heroic people into philosophers of misery. You flex your toes and silently thank every unknown person who ever decided that bare feet in northern winter were a terrible plan. Mittens and hoods protect the edges of the body where heat slips away fastest. A hood can cover head, neck, and shoulders, creating a warm pocket around the face. Caps may be wool, fur-lined, or simple cloth. Fur is useful, especially in trims, linings, or outer garments. But the popular image of everyone draped in enormous pelts is too dramatic. Most clothing is woven textile, shaped by need and labour. Fur adds warmth where available, but not every person walks around looking like a bear attending a meeting. A quirky tidbit hides in the thread. In some Viking Age context, clothing fasteners and decorative beads could be made from materials that travelled extraordinary distances, including glass, silver, bronze, amber, and imported silk. A person sitting by a smoky hearth in the far north might wear a tiny trace of trade networks reaching across Europe, the Islamic world, or beyond. So your winter outfit may include local sheep, home labour, and a little whisper of faraway luxury. Basically, medieval layering with global supply chains, but without tracking numbers. Repair is constant. You watch hands turn a sleeve inside out, check a seam, and work a needle through cloth. Needles may be iron, bronze, bone, or antler. Thread can be wool, linen, or sinew. A patch does not necessarily mean shame. It means survival, care, and thrift. Garments are altered for growing children, passed between people, cut down, relined, repurposed, and finally used as rags or stuffing. Nothing leaves the textile life cycle early unless it has been very naughty. Historians still argue whether Viking Age clothing should be interpreted mainly through archaeological finds from wealthy graves and towns, or through the much less visible everyday garments of ordinary rural people. Graves often preserve objects linked to status, ritual, and display, while daily work clothes rot away unless conditions are unusually kind. This creates a problem. The prettiest evidence survives in ways that may exaggerate elegance, the plainest. Most common clothing often disappears, which is exactly what plain clothing would do, because apparently even fabric can be modest. You pull the layers close again and feel the logic of them. Linen near the skin, wool over that, cloak around the shoulders, belt at the waist holding tools, pouch, knife, keys, or small necessities, footwear patched and stuffed, hood drawn up. The system is not perfect. Smoke gets into everything. Wool itches. Damp creeps in. A seam rubs. Someone's cloak smells strongly of sheep, and it may be the sheep's opinion that this is fair. Yet these layers create a living boundary between you and the winter air. Around the room, clothing hangs, dries, smokes, and waits. Wet mittens rest near warmth but not too near flame. A cloak is shaken out. A child's garment receives another patch. A belt is tightened over a tunic to trap warmth and keep fabric from flapping loose. Even sitting still requires arrangement. People tuck feet beneath hems, wrap cloaks around knees, and sleep in layers when the cold demands it. Naked comfort is a fantasy for warmer houses and much richer centuries. The winter night continues outside, but your body has gained its own small defences. Every thread holds labour. Every patch holds patience. Every itchy seam is a reminder that comfort in this world is not bought easily. It is spun, woven, stitched, smoked, worn, repaired, and pulled close under the low roof while the cold tests the walls and finds, at least for now, that you're wrapped against it. You lower yourself onto the raised bench along the wall and discover that a Viking sleeping place is not a bedroom, so much as a negotiated strip of horizontal territory. The bench is wide enough to sit, work, store things beneath, and sleep when the day finally gives up. It is not soft in any modern, cloud-like way. It is wood, padding, skins, cloaks, blankets, and attitude. If you expected a private chamber with a little bedside table and a cup of herbal tea, history gently pats your hand and points you toward the communal platform. The sleeping benches run along the long sides of many longhouses, built into the structure or arranged as wooden platforms. They lift people above the colder floor, away from drafts, mud, spilled liquid, and whatever small disasters collect at ankle level. Being raised even a little matters. Cold settles low, damp gathers low. Rodents prefer low. Your body, after a few minutes on the platform, becomes deeply supportive of ancient carpentry. You stretch out carefully, because space belongs to the household, not to personal luxury. Family members, workers, enslaved people, guests, children, and elders may all sleep within the same building, divided not by walls so much as rank, relationship, custom, and habit. The most honoured places are warmer, safer, and more central. Less favoured sleepers may end up nearer the edges, the door, or the animal end. Where the night includes bonus smells, status is never asleep for long. It even chooses where your feet go. A mainstream historical fact settles into the arrangement. Viking Age households were not just nuclear families. They could include extended kin, hired labourers, dependents, enslaved people, foster children, guests, and retainers, depending on wealth and setting. The longhouse reflected that social order, where you sat, worked, ate, and slept, could show who you were. Modern people use room numbers and office titles. The longhouse uses bench position, cloak quality, and whether anyone tells you to move your elbow, you pull a wool blanket across your knees. Bedding is assembled from what the household owns: woven blankets, animal skins, cloaks, straw mattresses, hay stuffing, feather bedding for the fortunate, and perhaps pillows filled with feathers, wool, or plant fibres. Wealth changes the night. A prosperous farmer may sleep under finer textiles and furs. A poorer person may rely on rough wool, a cloak, and the ancient art of not complaining loudly enough to be heard. Comfort is a hierarchy with cold toes. The bench also serves as daytime furniture. People sit here to eat, carve, sew, talk, and watch the fire. Chests may stand nearby or beneath, holding clothing, valuables, tools, and household goods. A person's sleeping area can become a small zone of identity, marked by stored belongings and habitual place. You tuck yourself into a corner and understand why the chest matters. It is wardrobe, storage unit, valuables locker, and possibly the only thing between your blanket and someone else's wandering knee. Privacy is thin. Sounds pass freely through the dark. A cough from one side, a sigh from another. Someone shifts, and the bench creaks. A child mutters in sleep. A dog dreams with tiny paw movements, probably chasing an imaginary sausage with the seriousness of a warrior pursuing glory. If anyone snores, the entire household becomes an audience. There is no escaping the performance. You simply fold it into the night and hope the snorer has useful skills in daylight. Sleeping near others offers warmth. Bodies create small climates, and shared blankets or close sleeping arrangements help conserve heat. This is practical, not sentimental. A winter night can be long enough to make even an annoying cousin seem like valuable insulation. People tuck cloaks around themselves, cover heads, and curl inward. Feet may be wrapped in extra cloth. Hands disappear inside sleeves. You learn the ancient sleeping position of becoming as small and judgmental as possible. The fire is banked, not abandoned. Embers glow under ash, sending out a low warmth that fades toward the walls. The room becomes layered in temperature, warmer near the hearth, colder near the outer edges, colder still by the door. A sleeper may wake during the night to add fuel, check embers, calm an animal, tend a child, or listen for weather. Sleep is not always one long, unbroken journey. It may come in pieces, folded between chores, noises, and the body's need to shift away from a hard spot. A quirky tidbit lies beneath the blankets. In Norse literature, seating and sleeping places can carry strong meaning, and the high seat, or honoured seat, reflect status within the hall. While sagas were written later and must be handled carefully, they preserve a world where you sit says a great deal. It is not hard to imagine that sleeping space could carry similar quiet messages. The best place is not just more comfortable. It tells everyone, even in the dark, that you matter. A mattress has rarely been so political. You notice the smell of bedding. Wool holds smoke. Skins hold animal warmth. Straw smells dry if well kept, sour if damp has crept in. A blanket close to the wall may feel chilly, while one nearer the room's centre feels more forgiving. Bedding must be aired when weather allows, beaten, dried, shaken, and protected from pests. Fleas and lice are part of the unpleasant background of many pre-modern homes. History does not always sparkle. Sometimes it itches, and then pretends this builds character. Historians still argue whether Viking Age sleeping arrangements were usually separated by gender, age, and rank in strict patterns, or whether practical household needs made them more flexible from night to night. Archaeological floor plans show platforms and zones, but they do not label who slept where. Written sources hint at custom, honour, and hierarchy. Yet actual winter behaviour may have depended on illness, guests, childbirth, weather, and who was currently least likely to kick in their sleep. You shift again and feel the platform beneath you. The bench is hard but predictable. The roof creaks. The wind strokes the outside walls. Inside, the household has softened into breathing shapes. Someone whispers once, then quiets. A baby stirs and is hushed against a shoulder. An elder coughs, clears their throat, and settles back into wool. The animals are darker masses beyond the human sleeping area, their breath adding low warmth to the night. There is an intimacy here that modern comfort often avoids. Everyone knows who sleeps lightly, who steals blankets, who wakes early, who mutters, who smells faintly of smoke no matter what they do. People do not merely live together, they endure the dark together. The bench becomes a social map and a survival tool, holding tired bodies above the cold floor while the long night moves slowly overhead. You pull the cloak higher, let your cheek rest against folded wool, and listen. The longhouse is never silent. It ticks, sighs, rustles, and breathes. The fire hides in ash. The walls hold. The bench supports the household in rows of sleep, not luxurious, not private, but warm enough, close enough, and safe enough. For winter, that is a kind of mercy. The darkness outside grows so complete that it seems less like weather and more like a substance poured around the walls. Inside, the firelight trembles over faces, and words begin to take the place of daylight. Someone speaks from the bench, not loudly, not formally, just clearly enough for the room to follow. A story begins. The longhouse listens. Hands keep working. Children stop fidgeting for a blessed few breaths, and even the dog raises one ear, because apparently the dog also has opinions about narrative structure. In the deep winter months, storytelling is not decoration, it is company, memory, teaching, entertainment, warning, pride, and social glue. Long nights leave space that must be filled, or else every creak becomes suspicious, and every gust of wind begins auditioning as a ghost. A tale gives shape to the hours. It carries people beyond the walls without requiring anyone to put on frozen shoes, which is always a strong point in its favour. You settle near the circle of listening. The speaker may tell of ancestors, voyages, feuds, marriages, bargains, storms, legal disputes, gods, monsters, clever women, stubborn men, unlucky fools, and heroes who make decisions so dramatic that everyone quietly agrees they would not survive ordinary farm chores. The voice rises and lowers. A pause arrives at exactly the right moment. Someone grunts approval. Someone else corrects a detail. Because no culture has ever invented storytelling without also inventing the person who says, "Actually, that happened near the river." A mainstream historical fact sits at the centre of the spoken warmth. Viking Age Scandinavia was largely an oral culture, even though runes were used for inscriptions, ownership marks, memorial stones, short messages, and magical or practical purposes. Long narrative traditions were carried by memory, performance, repetition, and skilled speakers. The sagas that survive in writing were mostly recorded later in medieval Iceland, after the Viking Age, but they preserve echoes of older stories, values, names, and social concerns. You hear the story as living sound, not as a book on a shelf. The storyteller does more than recite. They measure the room. If listeners grow restless, the tale sharpens. If children lean in, a frightening moment softens just enough. If a guest is present, the story may praise generosity or hint at local reputation. A tale is never entirely innocent. It can honour a family line, mock a rival, warn young people against foolish pride, or remind everyone that breaking an oath tends to lead to extremely inconvenient consequences. Entertainment and education sit side by side, sharing a cup. Poetry enters the hall with a different rhythm. Skaldic verse, associated with court poets and elite praise poetry, can be dense, intricate, and full of kennings. Those layered metaphorical phrases that describe one thing through another. The sea may become the whale road. Blood may become battle sweat. A ship may become the horse of the waves. It is beautiful, but also a little like listening to someone solve a riddle while showing off. You admire it, even while suspecting the poet knows exactly how clever they sound. Riddles and word games pass time too. A child is asked to guess an object from a teasing description. An elder gives a clue about a tool, an animal, or some natural force. People laugh when the answer is obvious only after it is spoken. Riddles train memory and wit, and they make the darkness feel less empty. They also let people be competitive without drawing weapons, which is generally a healthy development for any evening indoors. Gossip belongs here as well, though it rarely receives the grand respect given to heroic tales. You hear murmurs about a neighbour's bad bargain, a cousin's promising marriage, a boundary dispute, a missing tool, or the suspicious generosity of someone who never gives anything away without attaching hooks. Gossip maps the social world. It tells people who can be trusted, who owes whom, who has wealth, who has shame, and who should not be allowed near the ale unattended. If sagas are the mountains of memory, gossip is the footpath everyone actually uses. A quirky tidbit glimmers in the language itself. Some Viking Age and medieval Norse verse uses kennings so complex that later readers need entire explanations to untangle them. A warrior might be described through references to trees, weapons, gods, and battle all at once. Imagine asking for a simple story and receiving a poetic puzzle box instead. It is like someone bringing a harp to a weather report. Impressive, yes. Efficient, not especially. Historians still argue whether the written sagas preserve reliable memories of Viking Age social life, or whether they tell us more about the medieval Icelandic world that wrote them down. The answer matters because the sagas are rich, vivid, and irresistible. But they are not simple windows into the past. They are crafted works shaped by later politics, Christian influence, family pride, and literary art. Still, Even cautious historians listen closely, because within those later texts are details of law, honour, farming, feasting, travel, kinship, and conflict that feel rooted in older experience. The Longhouse story turns toward the uncanny. Outside, winter makes belief easier, darkness deepens, snow muffles distance, the wind can sound like voices, and roof beams can groan like old spirit stretching. People speak of elves, land spirits, Draugr, omens, dreams, and the restless dead. Such things are not always treated as fantasy in the way a modern audience might separate fiction from fact. The world is layered, and not every layer is visible. A strange sound beyond the door may be a fox, the wind, or something best not invited in for supper. You listen as a tale warns against arrogance. A man ignores advice. Naturally, this goes badly. A woman sees the truth before others do. Naturally. Several men take too long to notice. A bargain is made. A promise is tested. A journey becomes harder than expected. The details shift, but the lesson hums underneath. Pay attention. Respect bonds. Remember obligations. And do not assume strength alone solves winter, law, weather, or marriage, especially marriage. Even heroes should fear household negotiations. The room responds as one body. A laugh moves along the benches. A gasp is swallowed quickly by someone pretending not to be frightened. A child asks what happened next before the pauses ripened, and an adult gently hushes them. The fire snaps at a convenient moment, as if trying to join the performance. The speaker smiles into the shadows and continues. Words make the long nights smaller. They carry ships through black water, kings into memory, gods across the sky, and neighbours into mild embarrassment. They preserve names that might otherwise vanish. They teach children who they belong to. They let elders remain powerful even when their hands tire, because memory is a form of wealth. In a world where ink is rare and books are not household objects, a good memory is a chest of treasure that does not need a lock. The tale finally softens. The voice lowers. The listeners drift between attention and drowsiness. A final joke lands gently. Something about a boastful man defeated by bad weather, which feels realistic enough to be educational. The longhouse settles under the spell of spoken things. Beyond the walls, winter continues its enormous silence, but inside, language keeps people company, one story at a time. The fire has burned down to a steadier glow, and the longhouse becomes a workshop of small, patient movements. No one announces that work is beginning. It simply continues, because winter evenings are not empty time. They are the wide, dark pocket where necessary tasks collect. You sit close enough to see hands moving in the firelight, hands that know what to do without fuss. A knife sharpens a peg, a needle slips through cloth, a spindle turns, a broken strap is judged, trimmed, cursed softly, and repaired with the kind of calm hatred only a practical person can feel toward bad leather. This is how winter stretches into usefulness. The fields sleep under frost, the boats may be drawn up or sheltered, and travel becomes harder. But work does not stop. It changes shape. Instead of haymaking, ploughing, sailing, or long days outdoors, the household turns inward. Tools are fixed, nets are mended, clothing is patched, wool is spun, wood is carved, iron is checked, rope is twisted. Plans for spring are prepared under a roof that smells of smoke, broth, animals, and effort. You watch someone take up a drop spindle, a simple weighted tool that turns loose fibre into thread. The spindle hangs and spins, drawing wool into a long, twisting line. It looks easy until you imagine doing it evenly for hours without electric light. while sitting on a hard bench and listening to someone nearby breathe through their nose like a tired walrus. Spinning is constant work, often done by women, though textile labour varies by place and circumstance. Every garment, blanket, sail, band, and bag begins with fibres disciplined into thread. A mainstream historical fact rests in the turning spindle. Textile production was one of the most important labour systems in Viking Age households. Wool had to be cleaned, combed, spun, dyed if desired, woven on looms, cut, sewn, and repaired. In many Norse communities, women's textile work carried enormous economic value. The famous Viking ship could not go far without sails, and woolen sailcloth required staggering amounts of labour. Behind every dramatic voyage is someone spinning until their fingers ache, which is less glamorous than a sea battle, but much more useful. A loom may stand in the longhouse or in a related workspace, its warp threads hanging with weights that keep them taut. The warp-weighted loom is common in Northern Europe during this period. Woven cloth grows slowly, row by row, as the weaver passes the weft through the hanging threads and beats it into place. The loom is tall, almost architectural. It turns wool into shelter for the body and, in the case of sails, motion for ships. You look at the hanging threads and realise that a house in winter can contain the future movement of summer seas. Nearby, a man shapes wood with a small knife. He may be carving a spoon, a handle, a peg, a bowl, a toy, or a replacement part whose absence has been annoying everyone for days. Woodworking fills the quiet hours in a world held together by timber. Wedges, handles, shafts, boards, pins, and boxes. A good carver is not indulging in a hobby. He is keeping the universe from becoming inconvenient. The shavings curl at his feet, pale in the firelight, and a child eyes them as if they are treasure. Children will collect anything if it has no obvious use. A tradition older than most kingdoms. Tools receive attention. A dull knife is dangerous and inefficient. An axe head may need checking. A scythe blade waits for spring repair. A fishing hook is straightened. A wooden rake tooth is replaced. A sled runner is smoothed. A bucket hoop is tightened. A hinge receives a frown so severe it nearly repairs itself out of shame. Winter work is full of small judgments, and each one saves time later. The person who neglects a broken tool in January gets to regret it in April, when regret is traditionally busiest. Fishing gear needs careful hands. Nets tear, lines fray, hooks rust or bend. Floats and weights must be checked. In coastal and riverine communities, fish are too important to leave equipment in poor shape. You watch fingers tie knots by feel, quick and exact. The light is low, but the hands remember. A good knot is a quiet promise. A bad knot is a fish escaping with your dignity, which is difficult to smoke and store. Leatherwork occupies another corner. Shoes, belts, straps, pouches, harness pieces, and bindings all wear out. Leather must be cut, softened, pierced, stitched, greased, and patched. A leather shoe repaired in winter may carry someone through wet spring ground. A broken harness ignored in winter may become a real problem when an animal is needed. The longhouse is full of future emergencies being prevented in advance, which is very adult and therefore slightly irritating. A quirky tidbit hides among the craft tools. Some Viking Age bone and antler objects, such as combs, needles, gaming pieces, and handles, were made with remarkable care. Combs in particular could be multi-piece objects, riveted together and decorated. This means a person could be sitting in a smoky hall with cold draughts nibbling their ankles and still own a comb that took serious skill to make. Even in winter survival mode, hair apparently deserves technology. Games sometimes share the workspace. A board may be scratched into wood, and pieces made from bone, Glass, amber, or simple pebbles may be moved during pauses. Hnefatafl, a family of strategy games associated with the Norse world, pits unequal sides against each other in a contest of escape and capture. It is not exactly rest, because people immediately become competitive. Someone will claim they are just playing casually, then stare at the board as if planning a royal campaign. Humans are very predictable when small pieces are involved. Historians still argue whether wintercraft production in Viking Age households was mainly household self-sufficiency, specialised skilled labour, or part of wider trade networks even in rural settings. The answer depends on the object. A patched mitten and a carved spoon may be home repairs, a fine brooch, a balanced sword, or a decorated comb may point towards specialists, trade, or town workshops. The longhouse contains ordinary making, but it also connects to a larger world of exchange, skill, and status. You listen to the room's work sounds: scrape, twist, tap, pull, breathe. The fire sighs, a spindle hums against a palm, thread gathers on a shaft, a blade moves through wood, a needle tugs wool closed over a tear. None of it is dramatic, yet all of it is survival ranged into rhythm. Winter is not merely endured by waiting, it is endured by preparing, repairing, and keeping hands busy enough that the darkness cannot take over the mind. A final shaving drops to the floor. Someone holds up a finished peg with modest satisfaction, as if the entire household has just been saved from collapse by a piece of wood no longer than a thumb. Perhaps it has. In this world, small things matter. A peg holds a chest, a knot holds a net, a stitch holds a sleeve, a spindle holds the beginning of cloth. Under the smoky roof, by the sleepy fire, the night fills with quiet usefulness, and the future is made one careful motion at a time. The night has grown old, and the longhouse seems to listen to itself. The beams creak softly. The fire breathes beneath ash. Somewhere near the wall, a draught touches hanging cloth and makes it shift like a quiet figure. You know perfectly well it is only fabric. Probably. But winter darkness is a generous employer of imagination. In this room, practical labour and unseen forces do not live in separate worlds. The same hand that sharpens a knife may also murmur a charm. The same person who checks the latch may glance toward the threshold with caution, because not every danger arrives with muddy boots. Belief sits close to daily survival. The Norse world is full of gods as spirits, ancestors, omens, dreams, luck, fate, and beings that do not always fit neatly into a modern category. You may hear names spoken with respect: Odin, Thor, Freya, Frigg, Njord, and others, each connected to powers, stories, needs, and anxieties. The gods are not distant decoration. They belong to weather, fertility, war, travel, household continuity, and the strange pattern of fortune. When winter tightens around the farm, people do not only ask whether they have enough food, they wonder whether luck remains with the house. A mainstream historical fact settles into the dim room. Before Christianization spread across Scandinavia and Norse settlements, Viking Age religion was polytheistic, with ritual practices tied to family, farm, community, chieftainship, seasonal cycles, and sacred places. Belief was not organized like a single book-based system with one central authority. It varied by region and time. The great halls of powerful people, local shrines, groves, burial mounds, household spaces, and outdoor gathering places could all hold religious meaning. Faith was woven through custom rather than kept in a separate little box labelled Sunday morning. The threshold matters. You glance toward the doorway, low and dark. It is a practical opening, but also a boundary between inside and outside, known and unknown, household and wildness. Boundaries attract meaning. People may treat doors, posts, hearths, high seats, and burial places with special care. Some objects are placed deliberately in buildings, perhaps as offerings, protections, memorials, or ritual closures. Archaeologists sometimes find deposits beneath posts or near entrances, and must decide whether they are looking at ordinary rubbish, symbolic placement, or a little of both. The past, being difficult, refuses to label its storage bins. Luck is not simply good mood. It can be imagined almost as a quality attached to people, families, leaders, ships, weapons, and farms. A lucky person draws success. An unlucky person can make even a well-planned day collapse into wet socks and legal trouble. In stories, kings and chieftains may possess powerful luck that benefits followers. In a household, good fortune is guarded through right behaviour, generosity, ritual, reputation, and careful attention to signs. This does not mean people stop being practical. They still mend roofs and store food. They just also prefer the universe not to be offended. You hear talk of dreams. Dreams can carry warnings, messages, or glimpses of what may come. Someone might dream of animals, blood, weather, strangers, dead kin, or a journey. A dream is discussed in the morning, weighed for meaning, perhaps dismissed, perhaps remembered with discomfort. Winter encourages such thinking. Sleep is broken. Darkness is deep. The mind wanders through smoke and memory. A dream of a wolf near the door may mean danger, hunger, anxiety, or simply that someone told too many wolf stories before bed. Historians, unfortunately, cannot interview the dreamer, which is inconsiderate of the dead. Ghosts and the restless dead occupy another uneasy corner of the imagination. Later Norse sagas tell of Draugr, animated dead beings associated with burial mounds, haunting, strength, greed, and terrible stubbornness. These tales were written down after the Viking Age, but they reflect a broader concern with graves, memory, and the power of the dead. Burial mounds stand in the landscape as reminders that ancestors are not entirely absent. You may pass such a mound by day and feel only respect. By night, in winter, you may suddenly remember several urgent reasons to walk faster. A quirky tidbit glows faintly here. Some Viking Age graves include objects that seem intended either to honour the dead or to manage them carefully, such as stones placed over bodies, unusual positioning, or items arranged in striking ways. Scholars debate many of these cases, and not every odd burial means fear of the walking dead. Still, the idea that people sometimes took extra steps with certain bodies is wonderfully unsettling. Even in death, some neighbours may have required firm boundaries. Frankly, there are living neighbours like that too. Household charms may be simple, a spoken formula, a carved sign, a small amulet, a hammer pendant associated with Thor, a bit of iron near a cradle, a gesture made before travel, a blessing over animals, a careful word before slaughter. Not every action leaves archaeological evidence, and that is the maddening beauty of belief. The things people do with breath, touch, glance, and memory disappear quickly, though they may have mattered deeply. A charm does not need to be grand to comfort someone who hears the wind pressing at the wall. Christian influence also enters the Viking world over time. Trade, travel, missions, politics, marriage alliances, and royal conversion all bring new beliefs into contact with older practices. Some households may know both cross and hammer, prayer and charm, church teaching and inherited custom. Conversion is not a light switch. It can be gradual, uneven, political, sincere, strategic, confused, or all of these at once, because humans rarely change their entire view of the universe in a tidy afternoon. A person may accept baptism and still glance nervously at an old mound. The human soul is not always a cleanly swept floor. Historians still argue whether Viking Age religion should be understood as a coherent system shared widely across the Norse world, or as a flexible collection of local traditions later organised by medieval writers into a clearer mythology. The question matters because many famous myths survive in texts written after Christianization. The stories are precious, but they are not neutral recordings. They carry memory, poetry, politics, and reinterpretation. Still, when winter walls creak and a family gathers around embers, the scholarly debate feels less distant. People need meaning, whether the details vary valley by valley. You sit still and listen. A charm is whispered over a child who's been coughing. Someone touches a pendant at the throat. An elder mutters that the storm outside has a temper. A younger person smiles, pretending not to believe any of it, then looks toward the door when the wind knocks hard. Very brave, very convincing. The dog raises its head, which does not help anyone's confidence. Beyond the walls are fields sleeping under snow, paths erased by drift, dark water moving under ice, and graves hidden in the land. Inside are fire, food, animals, tools, words, and the fragile glow of luck carefully tended. Survival is not only physical, the mind also needs shelter. Belief gives shape to fear, rules to uncertainty, and companionship to silence. Whether the sound outside is wind, fox, spirit, or merely a loose board with dramatic timing, the household answers with ritual, memory, and the ordinary courage of staying together until morning. The longhouse changes when a feast begins to gather itself. The same walls, the same smoke, the same winter pressing outside, yet the room seems to lift. People sit a little straighter, the best bowls appear, a better cloak is shaken out and fastened, a bench is cleared with unusual seriousness. Someone checks a barrel as if listening for the opinion of the gods, or at least the opinion of the ale, which in winter may be nearly as influential. The air fills with expectation, warm and restless, and for a while survival dresses itself as celebration. A feast in the frozen months is never just eating too much because everyone is bored. Although, let us be honest, boredom has probably inspired many historic snacks. It is a social act. Food and drink move through the room as signs of wealth, generosity, alliance, rank, and obligation. A household that can feed guests in winter is making a statement. It says the stores are strong enough, the host is capable enough, and the people under this roof belong to a network of friendship, kinship, and reputation. Hospitality is not casual. It is a public language spoken with meat, ale, seating, and timing. You find a place along the bench, and immediately the arrangement matters. Important guests sit where they can be seen and honoured. Kin and dependents take places shaped by custom. The host moves through the room with careful attention, not only offering food, but measuring relationships. Who receives the first cup? Who is praised aloud? Who is seated near whom? Who has been invited, and who has very noticeably not been invited? A feast can warm a hall, but it can also freeze a rivalry in place more solidly than river ice. A mainstream historical fact stands behind the noise and glow. Feasting was central to Norse elite and rural social life, especially during seasonal gatherings, weddings, funerals, religious observances, legal assemblies, and political occasions. Archaeology from hall sites and farmsteads reveals large cooking facilities, drinking vessels, animal bones from special meals, and signs of communal consumption. In literature, the hall is repeatedly shown as a place where leaders give gifts, guests boast, oaths are made, poetry is performed, and status becomes visible, the meal is never just a meal. It is society chewing in unison. The food may be richer than everyday fare. A cut of meat saved for the occasion, freshly baked bread if grain stores allow, butter, cheese, or skyr set out with care, fish prepared with more attention, broth thickened until it feels generous. Perhaps game from a winter hunt, though hunting in deep cold is no cheerful picnic unless your idea of fun includes frozen fingers and being judged by a deer. Seasoning may include salt, herbs, onion, leek, mustard, seed, or imported spices in wealthier settings. The richer the household, the farther flavour can travel. Al moves from hand to hand. Mead, made from honey, is more prestigious where available, since honey is valuable and not always abundant. Imported wine may appear in elite circles through trade, raiding, gift exchange, or contact with Christian Europe, but for most people it is not an everyday drink. A cup has power. To accept it is to join the rhythm of the gathering. To refuse it may need explanation. To drink too much is easy. And then suddenly someone is explaining a family grievance from 15 years ago with great confidence and poor balance. Toasts and boasts begin. A person may praise the host. Remember ancestors. Honour gods or Christ, depending on time and place. Name kin, recall deeds, or make promises. Words spoken in a feast hall are not disposable. A boast can become a public obligation. An oath can bind reputation. This is dangerous, because warm drink and attentive listeners can convince almost anyone that they are destined for greatness. The next morning has probably ruined many heroic announcements by arriving with a headache and practical questions. Gift-giving may accompany feasts among wealthier households and leaders. Rings, weapons, cloth, animals, tools, or other valuables can move from host to follower, from kin to kin, from ally to ally. Gifts create bonds. They are not free in the modern sense. A good gift says, "Remember me, support me, honour me, answer when I call." Refusing or mishandling a gift can insult the giver. Accepting it can deepen obligation. Even generosity has strings, though in a well-run hall they are braided nicely. A quirky tidbit sits near the drinking vessels. Some Viking Age feasting equipment could be surprisingly elegant, including glass beakers, bronze fittings, decorated horns, and imported vessels found at high-status sites. Glass was not ordinary kitchen clutter. It signalled reach, trade, and wealth. So while one person may be sipping from a simple wooden cup, another may hold a delicate imported glass that has travelled farther than most people in the room. Naturally, this is the cup you absolutely do not want to drop. Music and performance loosen the gathering. A harp or lyre may sound. A poem may be recited. Someone tells a humorous story about a failed hunt, a foolish bargain, or a man who boasted of strength before losing a wrestling match to someone smaller and much more patient. Laughter helps the room breathe. It also manages tension. In a crowded hall where pride is thick and drink is flowing, a well-timed joke can rescue an evening from becoming a legal case with benches. Religious and seasonal meaning may hover over the feast. Midwinter gatherings, sacrifices, memorial meals, and later Christian celebrations all shape how communities mark the darkest part of the year. Animals may be slaughtered for practical reasons. But certain meals can carry ritual weight. Food shared with the living may also honour the dead or ask favour from powers beyond the household. In some periods and regions, older customs and newer Christian practices overlap in complicated ways. A feast can be pious, political, familial, and deliciously tense all at once. Historians still argue whether winter feasts in the Viking Age were primarily religious observances, political performances, economic redistributions, or household strategies for maintaining social bonds during isolation. The answer again resists being tidy. A chieftain's feast may secure loyalty, a family feast may honour ancestors, a seasonal meal may mark the turning of the year, a wedding feast may join property, kinship, and future children into one crowded room. People are efficient this way. They prefer one event to do 6 jobs while everyone is already wearing their better clothes. You notice, too, that feasting has limits. The household cannot empty its stores just to look generous. A wise host knows the difference between abundance and recklessness. The displayed plenty may be carefully chosen. The best things brought forward while less impressive stores remain hidden. Guests see warmth, meat, ale, and confidence. Behind that confidence is counting. Winter generosity must perform without becoming self-destruction. It is a delicate dance, especially after the second cup. The room grows louder, then softer, then loud again in waves. A bowl passes. A child falls asleep against someone's side. An elder smiles into the fire, remembering other feasts and possibly judging this one. The dog positions itself beneath the most promising bench with the patience of a professional. A piece of bread falls, and the dog confirms that fate is benevolent. For a little while, the long night feels less like endurance and more like belonging. Food becomes memory before it's even finished. Ale carries laughter. Smoke lifts the scent of roasted fat toward the beams. Words settle into reputation. In the glow of a winter feast, people remind one another that they are not merely surviving beside the fire. They are seen, ranked, obligated, teased, honoured, and held within the human web that makes cold darkness bearable. The longhouse settles after the feast's brighter mood, and the ordinary order of the household becomes visible again, quieter but no less powerful. You see it in who rises first, who tends the embers, who checks the animals, who receives the better portion, who is corrected gently, who is corrected sharply, and who can speak while others listen. Winter compresses everyone under the same roof, but it does not make everyone equal. The household is a small world, and like most small worlds, it has rules, habits, tensions, kindnesses, and at least one person who believes the younger generation has forgotten how to carry firewood properly. Children move through this world like sparks, useful, watched, loved, scolded, and steadily trained. A child may carry kindling, fetch water when possible, hold a lamp, sort wool, scare birds from stored grain, help feed small animals, or run errands inside the building when the weather outside is too fierce. Their tasks are not pretend work. In a farm household, even small help matters. You watch a child carefully lift a bundle of dried fodder, face solemn with importance, until one strand tickles their nose and dignity collapses into a sneeze. Learning happens by watching. No one sets up a neat classroom in the corner with cheerful drawings of runes and a snack schedule. Children absorb skills by standing near adults, copying hands, repeating chores, and being trusted with slightly harder tasks as they grow. A girl may learn spinning, sewing, food work, animal care, and household management. A boy may learn tool repair, livestock work, woodcraft, hunting, farming, or boat skills. These roles vary by household and need, and necessity often laughs at neat categories. If the cow must be fed, Winter does not pause to ask whether the chore matches anyone's future identity. A mainstream historical fact rests in the family structure. Viking Age households were shaped by kinship, marriage alliances, inheritance, legal rights, labour, and status. Women in Norse society could hold property, manage farms, initiate divorce under certain conditions, and wield considerable authority within the household, though the society was still strongly hierarchical and male-dominated in many public roles. The winter longhouse depends on women's labour and judgment as much as on men's. Anyone who doubts this is welcome to mismanaged food stores, to textiles, dairy, children, guests, and animals for 1 week and report back, assuming they survive the feedback. The mistress of the household may carry keys, a powerful symbol of management and authority. Keys hang from belts in some archaeological finds and later literary descriptions, associated with locked chests, stores, and domestic control. A key is small, but it speaks loudly. It says who controls cloth, food, valuables, and the orderly flow of daily life. You hear the faint clink of metal at a belt and realize it is not decorative noise. It is household power making a tiny sound. Elders hold another kind of strength. Their bodies may move more slowly, their hands may ache, and winter cold may settle harder into their joints. But memory gives them weight. They remember boundaries, marriages, debts, harvests, storms, births, deaths, feuds, settlements, and who once promised what to whom. In a world where much is spoken and remembered rather than written, an elder's memory can be evidence, warning, comfort, and weapon. They may not lift the heaviest timber, but they can still lift a room with one sentence beginning. That is not how it happened. You sit near an older woman as she teaches a child to twist thread evenly. Her correction is precise and calm, too loose, and the thread breaks, too tight, and it snarls. The child tries again, lower lip caught between teeth. Such instruction is more than craft. It is patience handed down. It is survival passing through fingers. The same happens with boys learning to sharpen blades safely, tend harness, judge weather, set snares, or listen when an older person says the ice is not trustworthy. Ice, like some relatives, may appear solid while preparing betrayal. Servants and enslaved people form another part of the household order, often less visible in romantic images of the Viking world but essential to understanding it. Norse society included slavery. Enslaved people, often called thralls in later sources, could be captured, traded, inherited, or born into bondage. They performed hard labour in farms, households, and workshops, and their lives were constrained by the status imposed on them. The warm longhouse contains inequality as well as community. Survival under one roof does not erase power. It can make power more immediate. A quirky tidbit lies in children's play. Small toys and miniature objects have been found at Norse and related archaeological sites, including tiny boats, animals, weapons, and gaming pieces. Some may be toys, some teaching objects, some ritual items, and some are difficult to classify because children, archaeologists, and small carved things enjoy confusing everyone. Still, it is easy to imagine a child pushing a little wooden boat through straw while adults discuss real ships, real storms, and real repairs. Play is practice wearing a smaller face. The household order also manages conflict. Crowded winter living can sharpen tempers. Someone eats too much, someone snores, someone avoids a chore, someone borrows a tool and returns it with the innocent expression of a person who absolutely broke it. Adults correct, negotiate, shame, joke, or command. Rank matters, age matters, gender matters, freedom and unfreedom matter, kinship matters, yet harmony is not optional. A household divided against itself faces winter poorly. Peace, even imperfect peace, is a technology. Historians still argue whether the Viking Age household should be understood primarily as a family unit, an economic workshop, a legal corporation, or a hierarchy of power centered on the farm. The answer is probably all of these at once. The same building shelters affection, labour, discipline, property, status, training, and memory. Modern categories fall apart under the roof beams. A grandmother telling a story may be entertaining a child. preserving law, shaping identity, and keeping everyone calm while the wind screams outside. You watch the children grow drowsy. One leans against a folded cloak, another tries to keep spinning and nearly drops the spindle. An elder notices and says nothing for a moment, allowing the lesson of tired fingers to arrive naturally. Nearby, a young man mends a strap under the eye of someone older, who offers advice only after the mistake is visible. This is how knowledge moves, not as grand instruction, but as correction, imitation, repetition, and the occasional humiliating knot. The longhouse breathes with generations. Babies sleep against warm bodies. Children learn the map of duties. Young adults gather skill and reputation. Mature adults carry responsibility. Elders hold memory and judgment. Dependents and servants labour within limits set by others. Everyone occupies a place, and winter makes those places impossible to ignore. The night is long, but it is not empty. It is filled with teaching, ranking, caring, watching, and the quiet pressure of belonging. You rest your hands in your lap and listen to the layered household sounds. A child sighs, a key rings softly, an old voice corrects a name in a half-told memory. Someone laughs under their breath. The fire glows low. Outside, cold presses without caring who is young, old, free, powerful, tired, or afraid. Inside, the household answers with order, imperfect and human, but strong enough to carry people through another dark stretch of winter. The room feels thinner when supplies begin to run low. Nothing dramatic has to happen at first. No great shout, no overturned chest, no storm tearing the roof open. It begins quietly, with a hand pausing inside a grain sack, a ladle scraping the bottom of a pot, a glance passing between adults who do not want children to notice. The long house is still warm enough near the fire, still alive with breath and work, but the confidence inside it has narrowed. Winter has a talent for making every small shortage sound louder. You watch someone measure barley with unusual care. Not much is said, because speaking too plainly can frighten the household, yet everyone understands. The portions shrink. Broth becomes thinner. More water joins the pot with the cheerful dishonesty of a guest pretending to be invited. A little fat is saved for the sick. A better piece of food is set aside for someone who must work outside. The household adjusts, not once, but daily, because hunger is not one event. It is a slow pressure that changes manners, tempers, sleep, and thought. A bad winter may come from many causes. Hay stores may be too small. Grain may spoil from damp. Fish may have dried poorly. A storm may block travel. Animals may fall ill. A harvest may have failed months earlier, and only now does the consequence step fully into the room. You feel how past weather can become present hunger. Rain during haymaking, frost at the wrong time, sickness in the herd, a broken boat, a poor catch. All of it follows people indoors and sits beside them like an unwelcome relative who refuses to leave. A mainstream historical fact lies beneath this anxiety. Viking Age farming in northern Europe and the North Atlantic depended heavily on seasonal planning, stored fodder, preserved food, and livestock survival in marginal environments such as Iceland, Greenland, and parts of upland Scandinavia. A poor growing season could create serious hardship. Archaeological evidence from animal bones, farm remains, and environmental study shows how closely Norse households lived with the limits of pasture, hay, climate, and storage. Survival was not guaranteed by toughness alone. Toughness without supplies is just suffering with better posture. The animals are watched closely now. A cow that weakens is more than a sad sight. It is milk lost, breeding lost, future wealth lost. But keeping an animal alive requires fodder. If the hay dwindles, decisions sharpen. which animal is too weak to save, which one must be kept for spring, which slaughter would feed people now but harm the future. These are not storybook choices. They are cold arithmetic done with living bodies. A goat chews calmly in the dimness, completely unaware that humans are doing moral accounting over its breakfast. People stretch food with skill. Bones are boiled again. Dried fish is soaked longer. Grain is ground finer. Shellfish, seaweed, bark flour, lichens, or gathered emergency foods may enter the diet in some northern places when times are harsh, though not all are pleasant or equally safe. A hungry household becomes inventive. This is admirable from a distance and very uncomfortable up close. Modern survival shows usually end after a few days. The Longhouse does not get a camera crew or a cheerful recap. Illness comes more easily when bodies weaken. Smoke irritates lungs. Crowding spreads coughs. Cold damp settles into joints and chests. A child's fever changes the whole mood of the hall. An elder's cough becomes a sound everyone listens to while pretending not to. Remedies may include warmth, rest, broths, herbs, charms, and practical care. Some help, some comfort. Some simply give people something to do while worry gnaws at them. In a world without modern medicine, attention itself becomes precious. The weather can trap the household. Snow may erase paths. Ice may make travel dangerous. A storm can keep people from neighbouring farms, fishing places, wood supplies, or grazing areas. You hear the wind outside, and suddenly distance becomes real. A neighbour may be only a few fields away in summer, but in a blizzard that distance might as well be a sea. A person may need to go out anyway to check an animal shelter, fetch fuel, clear a roof, or find help. This is where courage becomes less about glory, and more about tying your shoes properly while everyone watches in dread. A quirky tidbit hides in the harshness. In some Norse settlements, especially Greenland, archaeologists have studied layers of animal bones and refused to trace changing diets over time. The evidence suggests that people adjusted what they ate as conditions, trade, and climate shifted, including heavier reliance on seals and marine resources in some periods. So the ancient trash heap becomes a kind of diary, quietly saying, "We adapted, and dinner smelled different." It is not elegant, but it is honest. Historians still argue whether the eventual struggles of Norse Greenland were driven mainly by climate change during the cooling centuries, often associated with the Little Ice Age, by isolation from trade, by rigid farming habits, by conflict, by economic shifts, or by a combination of pressures. That debate belongs to a later and wider story, but the human problem is easy to feel here. A household can survive many difficulties if enough systems hold. When several fail together, even skilled people can be trapped by circumstances larger than themselves. Inside the longhouse, patience becomes a resource. Hunger makes people irritable. The same joke stops being funny. The same snore becomes a personal insult. Someone snaps at a child, then regrets it. Someone eats too quickly and earns a hard look. Someone hides fear by becoming very interested in repairing a tool that was not urgent until this exact moment. The emotional weather inside can grow nearly as dangerous as the storm outside. A wise household manages moods as carefully as food. This sounds noble, but mostly it means not starting an argument when everyone is cold, tired, and armed with spoons. One community may matter in hard times. Kin can help kin. Neighbours may lend food, fodder, labour, or shelter, though such help creates obligations. A chieftain or wealthy farmer may gain loyalty by supporting others, or lose honour by refusing. But generosity has limits when everyone is strained. Asking for help can save lives, and it can also expose weakness. Reputation, pride, and necessity sit together uneasily. The bowl you receive today may become the debt you answer tomorrow. You see the household count again, not just sacks and barrels, but days, bodies, animals, storms, chances. The fire is fed sparingly, bedding is kept dry. Work continues because collapse cannot be allowed to become a habit. A child is given a task, partly because the task matters and partly because fear is quieter when hands are busy. An elder tells a memory of a worse winter, perhaps to comfort, perhaps because elders have a legal obligation to mention worse winters whenever morale is fragile. Yet the longhouse does not become only misery. Small mercies remain: a warm cup, a shared blanket, a joke about the goat looking better fed than anyone else, a tiny piece of saved butter melting into a sick person's porridge, the dog resting its head on someone's foot as if offering medical treatment through weight. Survival, at its hardest, is still made of little gestures. The night deepens and hunger lies down among the sleepers, quiet but present. Outside, winter keeps testing the roof, the paths, the stores, the nerves. Inside, people endure by rationing food, heat, effort, and hope. The longhouse feels smaller now, but also more serious, like a boat in dark water. Every careful choice becomes an oarstroke. Every shared mouthful becomes a promise. Morning is not guaranteed to be easy, but the household holds together, and for this night, holding together is enough. A faint change reaches the longhouse long before warmth returns. It is not spring yet. Snow still lies outside. The walls still hold cold in their thick bones, and the fire still has to be coaxed like a sleepy animal with a stubborn personality. But the darkness has begun to loosen by a few quiet threads. You notice it in the doorway at morning, in the slightly longer pale edge of light beyond the threshold, in the way people pause and measure the sky without saying too much. Hope, in winter, arrives first as suspicion. The household does not celebrate too quickly. That would be rude to the weather, and the weather is clearly sensitive. A thaw can be followed by hard frost. A bright morning can become a storm by afternoon. Paths may soften into mud, then freeze again into treacherous ridges. Roofs drip, then glitter with ice. You learn that the returning sun is not a rescue party charging over the hill. It is more like a cautious neighbour tapping at the door, asking whether everyone is still alive and whether the roof leaks. Yet small signs gather. The smoke hole admits a different shade of light. The animals stir with more energy. Someone opens the door a little longer than usual and sniffs the air, as if reading news written in cold wind. Tools repaired by firelight are checked again. Nets, harnesses, buckets, blades, and wooden parts are brought out, inspected, sorted, and leaned where they can be reached. The household begins to face outward after months of curling inward. It is a slow turning, like a body waking from heavy sleep. A mainstream historical fact sits in this careful shift. Viking Age life followed strong seasonal rhythms. Winter often emphasized indoor work, repair, storage, storytelling, and social gatherings, while spring and summer brought renewed farming, grazing, travel, fishing, trade, and raiding for those involved in overseas expeditions. The famous movement of Viking ships depended on seasonal preparation. Boats had to be repaired, sails maintained, ropes checked, provisions gathered, crews organised, and weather watched. The long winter night, dull as it may seem, is part of the voyage before the voyage. You step near a chest where tools are being laid out. Iron needs sharpening, wood needs smoothing, leather needs oiling, a plough part must be readied. The fields are not yet open, but mines are already there. Walking furrows under snow, hay will need cutting later. Animals will need moving to pasture. Lambs and calves may come. Fences must be repaired. Boats must be launched. The body remains in winter, but the hands begin preparing for grass. The animals sense the change too, though they do not express it poetically. A cow shifts heavily. Sheep press toward feed. Goats behave as if they personally invented spring and are waiting for applause. The herd has survived, or enough of it has, and that matters. Each living animal is a future of milk, wool, breeding, meat, manure, and status. You watch someone run a hand along a cow's flank, judging condition beneath the hide. The animal is thin but standing. Sometimes standing is a victory. Food stores are counted with a different kind of tension now. The household must make what remains last until fresh growth. New milk, fish runs, trade, or slaughter can ease the strain. This late winter stretch can be dangerous precisely because hope is visible but food is low. The last part of a journey can still break a traveller. You look at a sack of grain and understand that spring is not a date on a calendar. It is the moment when the land begins giving back more than people must spend. A quirky tidbit glows in the lengthening light. In the far north, people have long watched the returning sun with deep attention, and later Scandinavian traditions preserved many customs around seasonal turning points. Light, candles, greenery, and special foods. Not all later customs can be projected neatly into the Viking Age, but the basic human response is easy to understand. When daylight has been scarce, even a small increase feels ceremonial. The sun does not need a grand speech. It simply appears slightly longer, and everyone quietly becomes less dramatic. Historians still argue whether Norse seasonal rituals around midwinter and the returning light were primarily religious offerings, community feasts, calendar markers, political gatherings, or practical pauses in the agricultural year. The evidence is uneven, shaped by archaeology, later written sources, and comparison with broader Germanic and medieval traditions. But standing here in the pale glow, the categories feel too neat. A seasonal gathering can thank gods, honour kin, display wealth, redistribute food, settle obligations, and remind everyone that the dark has limits. Humans enjoy making one event do a great deal of work. The longhouse begins to change its smell. Not entirely. Smoke remains, because smoke has signed a permanent lease. But damp thaw enters, wet wool dries differently. Mud appears near the entrance. Tools carry the scent of oiled leather and iron. Stored hay smells older, thinner, closer to ending. People speak more often of paths, neighbours, weather windows, fields, water, boats, and animals. The world outside is returning to conversation. You stand at the doorway as someone lifts the latch. Light spills low across the floor, weak but real. Snow reflects it, making the air seem larger. The cold bites your face, but beneath it there is a softness, almost imaginary. The horizon holds a pale band. Somewhere, water moves under ice. Somewhere, a bird gives a brief call, probably not for your benefit, but you accept it anyway. The household does not rush out. It has learned patience from the dark. Instead, it prepares. A woman checks cloth that may become sail repair. A man tests a handle. A child is sent to carry something light and returns carrying it like treasure. An elder watches the doorway and says the season is turning, then immediately warns that foolish people trust early weather. This is wisdom, delivered with the emotional warmth of a damp mitten, but it is wisdom all the same. You feel how survival has changed everyone. The longhouse has been shelter, workplace, stable, kitchen, court, memory chest, and smoky little universe. Now it becomes a starting place. The benches will still hold sleepers, the hearth will still burn. The walls will still need care, but the center of gravity is shifting outward toward fields, shore, pasture, and road. The sun lowers again, but not quite so quickly. That is enough. The fire is fed, the door is closed, and the room returns to amber shadow. Yet the darkness no longer feels endless. It has edges now. You sit among the quiet sounds of the household and sense the long winter giving way. Not defeated all at once, but thinned by light, softened by patience, and answered by people who have kept breathing beneath the roof. Now the longhouse grows quieter, and you let the last images soften. The fire is no longer a fierce centre of labour, only a low red glow under ash. The walls stand around you, thick and patient. The rafters fade upward into smoke-dark sleep. Outside, the snow holds the last blue of evening, and the wind has tired itself into a gentler voice. You do not need to count the grain now. You do not need to mend the strap, stir the pot, watch the door, or listen for storms. The household has done enough for this night. The animals settle. The benches creak once, then rest. A cloak is drawn close. A child sighs. Somewhere, a drop of thaw water falls from the roof and disappears into the snow below. The long winter has been heavy, but it has not lasted forever. No winter does. Even in the far north, the dark loosens. The sun returns by inches. Smoke rises. Doors open. Paths appear where there seem to be none. You can let that thought become small and warm in your mind. You're safe inside the story now. The cold remains beyond the walls, but it does not need anything from you. The longhouse holds. The embers breathe. The night turns slowly, peacefully, toward morning. Let your shoulders sink and let your hands unclench. Let the old hall fade into shadow, leaving only warmth, wool, low voices, and the soft promise of light returning. The fire dims, the snow quiets, the roof rests under the stars, and you drift, gently, out of the winter longhouse and into sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.